Welcome back to Sister Brunch with me, Fanshen Cox.
And me, Anya Adams. We're back and talking to you about Black Women Plus working in media, entertainment, and the arts. This marks our 4th episode of our Time's Up series on safety, equity, and power in Hollywood. On today's show, we're talking about COVID-19's impact on the industry, and most importantly, the disproportionately negative health and economic effects on women of color. For women that were caregivers and working outside of the home, the pressure was and still is enormous and debilitating. Today, we are asking the question, who was looking after us then? And who will look after us now that the world is starting to open up again?
We've got 2 amazing guests with us today. One is a return guest, and we're so glad she's definitely one of our most popular episodes. And our Time's Up guest today is Senior Manager of Research and Partnerships, Stephanie Odiase. And yes! And we've also got Kady Kamakaté joining us again.
Ow!
I'll tell you, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Stephanie first. She is passionate about using evidence-based research and policy to improve equitable outcomes. Now, she's overseeing the Time's Up Measure Up initiative. Y'all, if you have any, literally just go Google this right now or wait till the end and we're going to tell you how to see this. It's some mind-blowing shit. It's so beautifully done. And it's all about data and it's all about us seeing the numbers in front of us. So Time's Up Measure Up initiative explores the economic impact of COVID-19 on marginalized women in society. And we'll be talking to her lots more about that on the show. She also has a background in management consulting, policy research, and education advocacy. And our love, Kady Kamakaté, is an award-winning producer. She's a 2018 Sundance alumna. She has experience in narrative, documentary, and branded content. In collaboration with Homegrown Pictures and Macro Ventures, she co-created the series Leimert Park, which is now airing on BET+. So be sure to go check out that beautiful show.
We are so glad to have you guys today to be talking about this topic because it's so important.
Can we start with, because we've had Kady on the show before, so we've gotten to kind of hear her trajectory into what she's doing now. So Stephanie, I wonder if we could start with you. Walk us through how you ended up in this position with Time's Up.
Yeah.
Wherever you want to start.
I will start. Before I jump in, I want to thank you both for having me on the show and making this space for Black women to be Black women. This is just so important for us to have an opportunity to speak our truths and set right the incorrect narratives about what we do and who we are in society.
Yes.
But yes, what brought me to Time's Up? I'll give you the polished answer and then I'll give you the real answer.
Nice.
So the polished answer is, as you know, my background is in evidence-based research. I'm a social scientist by trade. I cut my teeth in formal training at Oxford. And, I had the great opportunity of working, doing research with the World Bank, with other organizations, with ed tech startups, as head of policy research at local civics. And I really wanted a job that was the nexus of research and not just doing research for research's sake, but research to actually have an impact and, social equity with a focus on gender and socioeconomic and race equity. Those things are very important to me. And basically all I studied in graduate school. So, when it was time for me to make the shift out of management consulting, I was looking around for a job that would fit me. I came across this role at Time's Up and I said, this is perfect for me. This is everything I kind of wanted to do and more. Having been a researcher on the other side of things, I kind of know how the research grant making process works on the receiving end, but never had been on the funder side. So it was a great opportunity to really kind of understand the full picture. Now, the unpolished or the true version of it is, unfortunately, my father passed away from COVID about a week after my birthday.
Wow.
Stephanie,
And
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So sorry.
Not a fun time, to put it very lightly. And that really rocked my world. It rocked my family's world. And I went through the mechanics of what it's like to take paid leave, what it's like to be the only Black woman in a company, what it's like to try to care for yourself and also care for others, right? And those lopsided care burdens that we experience. And I was getting to the end of my mental tether, to be quite frank, in the role that I was in. and feeling very unappreciated, feeling very unlooked after, given the theme of, our conversation today. And this role opened up and I said, this organization is doing everything that I'm currently experiencing. This organization is trying to combat the issues of my lived experience. I'd be a fool not to apply. So I threw my hat in the ring and look how
There
good
you
that
are.
is.
Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry for what you experienced. And
thank you.
Kady, we've had a few times to get to speak about what it has been like for you on your end as kind of a freelance producer navigating that world. Do you want to talk about kind of some of the things that you had to do also that you were facing during COVID as this freelance producer?
I quit my full-time, very well-paying job in January 2020. And timing wise, I always think about if I could have changed it, would I have? And I think no, because the fear of being in a job that was not serving me and then feeling trapped because of a pandemic would have been worse than navigating the unforeseen circumstances because everybody was, right? Everybody was in the same boat of just we don't know what's going on and whatnot. It was twofold. It was one, experiencing the uncertainty at the same time that everybody else was, and being in a position where I didn't need to have the answers, which oddly was nice. It's hard to say. It's hard to have nice moments in the context of a global pandemic and so much heartache and loss, as Stephanie already kind of shared. So that was also, I think, complex because you're having these moments of repose and of, frankly, downtime after 6 years of being nonstop that I didn't even know I needed until I realized I could be on my couch for a year and still wouldn't be rested enough. So there was that I was navigating. And then they came to a time where the industry clearly just did not want to sit still. Nobody wanted to sit still, right? So the noise and the whispers of productions are picking back up and how are we going to do it? And that flurry of what certifications are needed, what steps are needed, documents flying left and right, panels happening left and right about educating ourselves to do this safely started going on. And I kind of came to a point of I was only going to do it if I felt that I could limit the exposure of anybody on my productions. So I only ended up shooting about 2 times. They were challenging.
What was challenging about it for you?
In the milieu that I usually work in, which is productions that are usually under 100K, that became unsustainable with the added layers of PPE, of testing, logistical requirements needed by a production now. So what you could get for 70K, you needed 120K. And there was a level of resistance from companies of wanting to do that. And it ultimately came down to, how comfortable do you feel with risk? Right. And I had to literally threaten to walk off on one shoot because I was we're not getting anything that makes sense.
Right.
And fortunately, they came to it and they provided all the gear. But, it's challenging. At the end of the day, you just want to worry that, the footage got to your editor. Not that, I hope my crew makes it.
This is Sister Brunch with Fanshen and Anya Adams. Stay tuned for more of our conversation with Kady Kamakaté and Stephanie Odiase.
Welcome back to Sister Brunch. I'm Anya. Let's get back to our conversation with Stephanie Odiase and Kady Kamakaté.
The Time's Up Measure Up initiative has stated that we're living through one of the starkest periods of inequality in our history, right? And so you have what that means in terms of narrative and storytelling, and then you also have what that means just in terms of Black women's lives, how it is that we're just living every day. So how do we navigate the fact that we were working during this period of inequality, all of us doing work that would have an impact in that sense, but do you have any feelings of survivor's remorse? And how do you deal with that? And if you're not feeling it, what keeps you from kind of realizing that's not effective or helpful for you?
I think that that's such a multifaceted question and such an important one to ask. And when it comes to survivor's remorse, I feel that in multiple ways, right? Quite literally. And in the more kind of metaphoric sense of yes, I am privileged enough to have like a great job in an organization where I can work from home, where I'm safe. But as I'm sure we all know, and as the research says, so many frontline workers working in the care industry, working in the service industry, the food industry, et cetera, are usually mostly women of color, right? And within that, of course, there are a lot of Black women. So you're sitting at home comfortable when you have Black women, a lot of whom are low paid, a lot of whom do not have the resources that they need. They don't get the PPE, they don't get the hazard pay, they don't get a lot of the things that, you know, would make their work more tenable, more safe. And there's this almost like cognitive dissonance that's going on in society, even besides what I'm feeling, right? Of like, it's okay if they do that, but like, I don't need to do that.
Right.
I'm at home chilling,
Right.
right? And those are the women that are still employed, right? And forced to go to work, right? Put themselves at risk, put themselves in perhaps other unsafe situations as well with, you know, employer power. Like, you have to come in when I tell you to. You have to do this, you have to do that. But those are women who are employed. And there are a number of women that aren't employed. We still have about 2 million women out of the workforce as of today's like BLS jobs data, right? And Black women unemployment rate is stagnant at like 8-9%. Like, it's super high. So you sit back and you think, okay, I'm sitting in this place of privilege. I'm comfortable where I am, but there are women who aren't comfortable, essential workers who are risking their lives. There are women who remain unemployed or have fallen out of the labor market entirely. And then you see the stats about, you know, essential workers of color who are living paycheck to paycheck, who have risked food insecurity, who have risked housing insecurity. And it's just like, damn, like, this is grim. So it's a lot.
It reminds me of like thoughts and prayers, right? There's like this whole thing that's happening with like, everyone's thanking the frontline workers. It's like thoughts and prayers about the shooting, but like there's not an active movement.
Right. And that's the cognitive dissonance I'm exactly referring to, right? Like, you can distance yourself. You can clap for essential workers at 7 p.m. every
and
night
feel
during the
good
summer.
about yourself.
Right. But what are you doing to actually help them? Exactly.
Right.
Go to a party, get COVID, and then go visit them.
And then they have to take the risk of taking care of you. I think, Stephanie, that's why your work is so important in data collection and analysis, is because it's normalized for us to go about our days and not necessarily have exposure to that. And you've got these numbers saying this shit is still going down and it's at emergency levels. And what do we do about it? So, Kady, I'm wondering if you've seen a difference in the storytelling that you're doing, that you're producing based on kind of us knowing this data, like understanding where things are, or even in the projects that you choose to support.
Yeah, I mean, kind of to your earlier question about the guilt associated with not necessarily being kind of on the front line. One of the things that happened is I had the opportunity to pivot because I was struggling with what my risk to my crew and exposure to myself being. I had the opportunity to join a podcast company that was going to be completely remote. And it literally felt like a golden ticket landed in my lap. And regardless of what ideas I had about like my career and those plans, it was kind of like I get an opportunity to work in my home and still story tell. So I felt very, again, privileged in that moment and understanding the like that so many people, including friends that just did not have that opportunity and had to face going back to set all the time. So you do kind of navigate the guilt and also just understanding the risk and understanding not purposely going out and socializing and doing reckless behavior that you know will impact the community that you know. I have the privilege to stay inside, so I'm going to. Or if I'm going to take certain risks, these are certain precautions that I'm going to do to make sure the people that I come in contact with or the grocery store, whatever the case may be, I'm as protected as possible. So I think those were kind of the things that I was navigating with. So in the sense of how my storytelling and whatnot has changed, yeah, it's audio. it's audio focused now.
The medium itself,
the medium itself has completely changed. But I'm navigating, you know, kind of that on another production that Fanshen, you know, a little bit about.
I'm EP on this, y'all. I'm so proud. Yes.
So just thinking about, you know, approaching a narrative script that has quite a bit of physical contact that takes place in a single location, indoors, in the midst of a pandemic. Like, there's a lot of responsibility in that. And when you care, that's a differentiation I also want to make. There's a lot of people that are in industry
Yeah.
that don't care about the impact of the craft to other people. So I think when you care, you're thinking about testing, how do you separate, and especially when you care and you don't have the budget. It's like a
Yeah.
lot of these studios were putting out these like amazing and very detailed lists, and I'm like, well, this 75K I got, I'm not gonna do anything. So am I choosing to do art but then at the detriment of people's health? And like, what's that conversation? Is this inequality only going to show certain stories because they have the money for it? And that's another weird space, right? Because studios do have the money, and maybe certain commercials or branded projects what I can do it, but when you're thinking of a short film that could, they don't. So navigating that, it's going to be a challenge, but you know, the team is dedicated and excited for it. But yeah, it might mean we can't do certain things.
Hey, it's Fanshen, and you're listening to Sister Brunch. We'll be right back. And by the way, if you have not already followed us, go to Twitter right now and do that. We are on Twitter at Sister Brunch. Welcome back to Sister Brunch. I'm Fanshen, and let's get back into this conversation with Stephanie Odiase and Kady Kamakaté.
Are there any things that have happened because of this pandemic that you would like to keep?
Remote working, I think, is beautiful.
Absolutely.
Remote working, Stephanie, for you?
Yes. So listen, I can get in the soapbox and talk about the beauties of remote working and flexible work hours
For sure.
for
As you
hours.
should. As you
And I-
should.
And it's so important, right? Because back in, BC, before COVID, when we had to go into the office, it was all about FaceTime and productivity and showing up. And like, in my opinion, like these very like neoliberal, patriarchal, capitalistic ways of being a good performer. When honestly, I can sit at home in my head wrap, I can sit at home in my leggings, and I can very much so get my job done. And as a Black woman, it was expected that you do that 4 times more just to get a quarter of what, the white cis het counterparts were getting. So no, I need to be working from home. I need to be comfortable. I need to hold on to the space that I created for myself. And guess what? My work has only gotten better. Like, me being a happier person increases my productivity, and my productivity isn't the only thing of value to you.
Right. So not only do we generally, once we're in the office, have to work 3 times as hard, which we have to do from home anyway, but also we don't have to deal with your bucked up microaggressions in our faces either. We don't have to have the data that we're constantly making in our heads of looking around and not seeing anybody else that looks like us and our families, right? Like I kind of appreciate that.
I feel like as COVID starts to wane, is that old white patriarchal way of being, I think people are going to push that, because I think there is a certain degree of like energy suck power, play that these men that are running these companies are missing.
Oh yeah, they're the ones pushing to get back in the office.
They're already.
Yes, there's a huge push to get back in the office. It's so interesting that
it's mostly from cis hetero men. They don't want to family care. They don't want to share responsibilities.
They
in the
don't
household.
care about that shit.
They don't want to do anything like that. Yeah.
And it's funny that you say that, Anya, because so we did this great project with a behavior research firm called Ideas 42, basically kind of dismantling the notion around the ideal employee. So showing up, giving your pound of flesh, never taking vacation, not taking your sick days. And, what are the behavioral levers around shifting it away from the ideal employee to the ideal employer, right?
Ooh,
So, we're trying to really dismantle like employer monopsony and like really
wait.
abuses.
Monopsony? What is that?
Employer monopsony power is basically the lopsided power dynamics between an employer and an employee. So because the market, behooves them, there are a lot of people who need a job, they can kind of get away with murder, right? So they can do the toxic things that serve them and, protect their P&L at your expense. Speak on it. It is capitalism. It really is. So in this research, some of the behavioral interventions that they've pushed forward is, being like flexible working hours, like being able to have conversations with management about, this is what I need. I'm a new mom. Like, can you please work with me and set up policies and resources that supports me as a family So as we go into phase 2 of that research and, try to implement it and see real world impact within organizations, we hope to push back on exactly that. The white men who are just like, come back and be under my shoe. We're not doing that anymore.
And that's because you can take that research, flip it back to them and say, this is how it works. You think you're productive by doing this, but that's not productive.
Yeah. And I think it translates to our production world, where I just came off a very big budget show and the priority was 10-hour days.
10-hour days is
phenomenal.
10-hour days on.
By the way, she's saying that's a good thing.
I'm saying
Stephanie.
it's a good thing.
Believe it or not, she's saying that's a good thing.
10-hour days with an hour lunch, and they had 2 mandatory mask breaks of 15 minutes where you had to leave set and take your mask off. The mask breaks, they do like curtail momentum, and you know what momentum, you need momentum on set, and sometimes that was a problem. But in general, it allowed you to breathe and move through your day and know, I'm going to have this. This is due to me 3 hours after call. So I hope that stays in the upper echelon world of big money filmmaking, is that they prioritize that and shorten the days. Now that they've seen we can be productive, still do it, and do it in less time.
We've talked a lot about kind of the practical and like physical production. And I'm curious if, one for you, Stephanie, how qualitative research enters into your work. And then for Anya and Kady, are you seeing those differences in the storytelling itself?
I think that that's a great question. And when people think of data, they usually just think of quantitative data. And I feel like, we need to take a bit of a step back from that, because when you think of quantitative data, it's so centrist, right? It regresses to the mean. It focuses on the average. But when your society regresses to the mean of whiteness, you're losing so many narratives. You're losing so many people. You're not talking about trans people, non-binary people, disabled people, all communities of color. The list goes on, right? So in our work, we very much so try to uplift, the quantitative data with qualitative data. And there's so much importance and deference that can be given to someone sharing their lived experience. And we see that specifically in our work around the data dashboard. Congrats to my amazing teammate, Anwisha Majumdar. That was her child. She brought that to life in such an amazing way. So to complement the data dashboard, we have this interactive platform where you can go through the lived experience of someone, specifically a woman, who is trying to navigate the time that we find ourselves in, right? So you might be going through the story of someone who is a domestic abuse survivor, the story of a single mom with increased care burdens, and really seeing what this time is doing to them, right? So when we go back to the policy and the practice, you're not just abstracting away someone's lived experience when you look at the average and the data. You really get to see what someone's truly been through. And outside of that, we also have our oral history project, which we're getting off the ground soon. And that's where we're going to really dig into more of those qualitative stories around women and non-binary people, because again, they are very lost in the data. And, really see how this time and over time, we're going to track this over time, has really had an impact on them, not just in terms of, them being a worker, but them being a person.
That's exciting.
Kady and Anya, I'm curious for you. These shows are starting to speak language that I feel like we've been pushing for them to say, even just begging for you to just speak some truth in these stories. And now I find myself questioning it.
All I'm saying is there was a show written by First Nations people, which I was so excited about.
It's not problematic.
Not good.
It's not good.
No, we still have to have taste. I'm really actually not team just because it's for the cause. It has to be good. I think that diminishes our taste and our skills and our expertise and our craft to co-sign something that we don't think is good. If I don't like it, I don't like it. If it's bad, it's bad. It doesn't matter if it was full black, all women, everything. I'm like, it didn't work out. But
I'm just careful with acknowledging that it's my perspective is that it's bad. Like obviously, if the lighting needs to be good, the audio needs to be good. You know what I'm saying?
I can forego
and
all
trust
of that
me,
if the story is
even
great.
that.
But if the story falls short.
But even haven't we learned what good storytelling is from whiteness also? You know what I'm saying? And not to say that that's the only way, but that we have been told what makes a good story. And so I just feel, we've talked about Tyler Perry, right?
He's got some great stories.
And that's the thing, right?
Stephanie,
Tyler Perry started out with Medea. He started out with things that were a little lowbrow. I'll put it like that.
But
there's a
folks
space
loved
for
it
it,
and
yeah.
identified
But folks
with it.
loved it and they ate it
Yeah.
up, right? And I feel like there's still importance, even if we don't love it. Like, I don't, listen, all skin folk ain't kinfolk, right? Like, I don't co-sign every single thing because someone fall in the, melanin spectrum. Like, I'm not going to, but I still think that there's importance to even putting that story out there in the first place. Right?
Agree.
Because if the counterfactual is it not existing at all, then
we don't want that.
That's
right.
True.
It's another story that's just not
correct for sure.
And the way I think about it, Anya, of the show that I'm assuming you're referring to is that then, at the very least, kids or emerging storytellers at least now get to say, oh, that's something that I can do. Hopefully they're also saying, I'm going to do it even better. You know what I'm saying?
Maybe
I can do it better.
It's a motivator. It's a motivator.
It's a motivator. Yeah. So, we don't take it for that.
I'll take it. All right.
There's something too about like the normalizing effect, like as we see all these images, as we see all these things, we start seeing that that's part of our worldview and that shapes it. And I think to the earlier point, what I've seen is just like a heightened level of sensitivity. I feel like a lot of people that I think normally would have not had second thoughts, second guesses, second glances about certain materials, certain scripts are having pause, which is amazing. And are looking at it, hey, does this truly depict this community? Does this character feel as rounded for this scenario? Is it odd? Is it whatever? And having questions that we can watch shows from even 5 or 6 years ago and we're like, wow, they said that and they felt comfortable at it. And now there's pause. Yeah. And I think that pause is what is the most amazing thing in this process, is that we are, all of us, because we all have blind spots. I definitely have blind spots in certain communities that I'm not part of, and therefore I know, okay, this needs another look. This, even with our short, right? Like, we lose a Black woman, I'm a Black woman, we have a really strong through line about Korean Americans in there, and we have a consulting producer who's Korean American. We're bringing in Korean American filmmakers on this process because we are not going to be from a position that we are an authority on this, right? And I think that those types of conversations are happening more, and that to me is super important.
We're gonna have to wrap up fairly soon, but I know, but what would you love to see in the future for Black women in the workforce, both in Hollywood and Hollywood and beyond? What would each of you love to see?
I would really love for Black women to really sit in the sense of pleasure and what makes us happy and what really brings us joy. Because I think that is like not part of these conversations, because there is so much work to do, because, the struggle is nonstop. It's in all directions. It's now laden on top of a pandemic. So it's even, heightened. But for me, I'm centering myself, and I would challenge everybody else. And when I say everybody, it's every Black woman in the world to really sit and identify what pleases them. And at a core, start shifting their lives to be inclusive of that. And if that means, hey, I need to work remote because I can actually afford housing in another state, and that's going to bring me pleasure and give me security, then advocate for that. If it means pushing for that, promotion, then great. If it means quitting that job, then do it. If it means leaving that partner, then do it. If it means saying, actually, I don't want to have children, let's do that. If it just means living in your truth, even if it's just actually, you know what, I really don't like oat milk, I just want full fat milk, cow's milk, then do it.
I'm literally envisioning myself smoking a nice sativa pre-roll right after. Right when we hang up.
I just think so much of, our day-to-day life is embroiled in fighting for existence, for air, as often we found in this pandemic, that, just sitting in pleasure is very not part of our conversation in day-to-day life. And I think there's so much strength in that, and there's so much renewal energy in that. And there's so much autonomy in that. People are really frightened when you're sitting in that space. That's my wish.
Thank you, Kady. Thank you.
I like it.
Heard.
I love that. And to almost be, the compliment to Kady's answer, Like the way I think about it, you know, when I think of like, what's my goal for Black women? What do I want for them? Of course, me being a research and data and analysis nerd, like it's very structural and very comprehensive in its application, right? Like when I think about it, I want better solutions and better narratives for Black women. What that looks like in the public sector, right? Like, you know, we have a lot of great things coming out of the Biden administration with this giant Build Back Better plan. But we need to make sure that that sticks, right? Like we're so close to having like federally mandated paid leave, and that's going to help mothers, that's going to help caregivers, that's going to help so many women who have to take on so many burdens, and a lot of those women are Black women, right? In the private sector, I want us, as I've mentioned at the top, like I want us to shift away from this ideal employee model and go to the ideal employer model. I want us to have jobs that fill in, you know, this wealth gap that is just insane. There's no reason why Black women should be earning 63 cents on the dollar compared to white men, which over time means $1 million loss in wealth because of this gap. Like I want that to be closed. I want culture change for us as well, right? Until we actually stick the narratives about the value of Black women, about our contribution, about what we have done for this country since the days of slavery, to our good sis, Stacey Abrams, saving this country from itself in the last election, we're not going to change anything. And like, ultimately, all of that to me comes from research. We need better research. We need more timely research. We need more comprehensive research, because until we actually center everything that we do around Black women, our society itself as a whole is not going to heal. You know, as they say, rising tides lift all ships. We need to make sure that Black women especially, are at the center of the data that goes into the policy and the practice that really very much so dictates our society.
Beautiful. So. Yes. Thank you both. Yes to all of that. You can definitely check out Stephanie's work on Time's Up and the Measure Up initiative. It's powerful. It's important. It will teach you so much. And Kady is just blowing up in the best of ways. We're lucky we had her when we had her on. And so we get to follow this beautiful path. Watch Lamert Park on BET+. Keep an eye out for Kady.
Thank you for listening to Sister Brunch with me, Anya Adams, and Fanshen Cox. That was our conversation with Stephanie Odiase and Kady Kamakaté. Visit sisterbrunch.com to find out more about them and their projects. Don't forget to visit timesupfoundation.org to find out about their work and how to follow them on social. And follow us on Instagram at Sister Brunch Podcast. We're also on Twitter at Sister Brunch and on Facebook at facebook.com/Sister Brunch Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our show after the show ends. This episode was created in partnership with the Time's Up Foundation. Our show producer is Brittany Turner. Our executive producer is Christabel and Sia Boade. We acknowledge that the land we record our podcast on is the original land of the Tongva for those of us in Los Angeles, and the Coast Salish for Anya, who's in Vancouver. Can't wait to see you next time. Take care.